I'm proposing that we talk about the vision for the network. And I think, Alex, you had a call this morning.
Yeah, we covered the entire Hypha network, all the dimensions and opportunities that are offered inside the network. So it starts with this idea that there's an underlying layer, the network itself, which is the DAO operating system. And the beauty of this model is that each DAO will benefit from this DAO operating system and benefit from the tokenomics that is available at this layer. I could see that there was a real focus to try to really understand what we were proposing. And we went through the different layers, right? So I was talking about the network, the DAO OS. And on top of that, we have the DAOs that can develop their own business model, their own DAOnomics, meaning that they can use their DAO token to create value as well, the DAO utility token. So I think that's also a center of interest for the participants, because those who want to support the network, because that means that they can really develop new ventures, new organizations, but at the same time participate to the health of the entire network, which I think is beautiful.
Let's just drill into that. What does it mean, this entire network?
The Hypha Network, which is a space of collaboration over competition. And in that space, we are welcoming organizations to transition to the DAO space. So that's really the endeavor of the Hypha Network, which offers a lot of possibilities, a lot of opportunities for traditional organizations to cross the mirror, if you like, and to get involved into this new collaboration space. We are anticipating a large number of organizations, 250,000 organizations by the end of 2026. And we can only achieve that because of decentralization. This idea that we can drive exponential growth through decentralization. And for that to happen, we are calling for contributions, from individuals, organizations that want to play in that space, want to deliver services, want to support the network so that it can become a use case. And more than that, demonstrate that we can do business differently, generate value and impact at the same time with new models, new circular models, regenerative models that we are promoting, of course, inside this network.
Of the people that attended today's call, what kind of services or interests did that group have for the network, or what do they do already?
Yeah, so most of the participants this morning had an experience in consulting, delivering services, business model strategies, and, this type of services. And I think what they see as a potential is that it's a new playground. It's a new innovative space where you can apply your knowledge in a different context, in a different container, and be innovative in terms of how to create value and impact. I think what the network is doing is that it transforms impact into value. The current economic system, as a narrow view, only focuses on financial value most of the time and considers impact as withdrawing value from the equation. What we can do with the tokenization, and especially the impact token, is that we can reconcile these two concepts, value and impact, and transform impact into value, actually, because that's really what's valuable.
What I'm imagining is different projects have different types of impact, right? That it's like their organizational purpose, it's their mission, it's the deliverables that they have, and capturing that as value within tokenomics. How do you describe that, Alex?
Yeah, so the idea is that we are working on an impact framework that will give the possibility to DAOs to actually measure, evaluate their impact, and transform this impact into impact tokens. And the beauty of these impact tokens is that they are codified with the nature of the impact that has been created. So they become really meaningful and valuable for companies that are looking to offset their carbon footprint, for example, or want to find an alternative to ESGs, for example. So there are a lot of projects in the Hypha network that are working on this definition of value and working on platforms, prosperity platforms, they call it, to actually create the marketplace for real impact encoded on chain to be actually transformed into value.
To go back to the meaning of our name, it's Hypha, which is threads that make up mycelium network. It's like these building blocks. And I remember that since the beginning, that was always for me the guiding principle. So today we talk about Hypha Network and kind of organizations. Let's try to focus on what this ecosystem business model means compared to traditional model. Well, you have multiple people and then they are competing with each other. I imagine that most of the people that listen to this are in some traditional world in terms of organization, or as we like to call it, Web 2 world, right? And then they are moving here and then they are like, what's this DAO thing, right? What are these digital organizations? To drill down and connect this idea, how tokenomics are related to this model and what is tokenomic in the most simple terms.
Tokenomics or token models are a way to create, from my perspective, economy, but not always. Sometimes they're just a unit of account, but the sort of magic of tokens on the blockchain is that you have an immutable record, meaning there's always going to be a record of every transaction, and that's public. So anybody can see what's going on. You can't hide anything. So if I send a token to Alex's wallet, that will always be on the blockchain. You can use a block explorer or other means, and you can see that I sent it, exactly when, how much, and so on. As Alex was talking about, he was mentioning impact tokens, right? So that's a way to put a certain type of value behind a token. In this instance, there would need to be like a measurable system, right, of what impact means. There might be multiple definitions depending, but that's where the token model comes in, or the tokenomics. That's where you kind of explain like what the token is, what is it used for, right? You could have tokens that represent stocks. Those would be securities. You have utility tokens. What does that mean? It means you can use the token to get something. I've always seen tokens as the easiest way to align financial incentives in human history. It is so much easier to do this. If you really think about it, let's say you are sitting there in a high school class and there's 30 people. And you want to try to find a way to incentivize everybody to move in the same direction, to do the same thing, to have the same goal. Prior to tokens, you'd have to have some kind of agreements and make sure that everybody trusts you and maybe write it out on paper and have like a mini contract, right? Be all this stuff. Lots of paperwork, lots of convincing, lots of trust. With a token, you don't need that. The token is tracked. Nobody needs to trust you. So it allows strangers all over the world to come together and add value and be aligned in their incentives. And that is amazing. I don't think we've really even scratched the surface of it yet. It's just been the low-hanging fruit, but I think stuff like impact tokens, and there's just a lot. I think we're going to do amazing things with these over time.
To add to what you said, Dominic, I think a token can define a sense of belonging, and really a shared purpose, because that's what consolidates the value being created across the ecosystem by contributors that are willing actually to push the concept forward, that believe in the mission and want to actually participate to the health of this economy that we are creating. And for Hypha, the equation is quite simple. And the Hypha token is a utility token. The utility of the token is to allow members of DAOs to access the technology. That's all there is. That's really simple, really clear. And you need tokens as a DAO if you want to invite members into your DAO. By bringing a lot of energy, and people are the greatest energy that we can bring into this network of collaboration, you are actually participating to the health of the entire network, the entire ecosystem. And you can create yourself ecosystems. And what the tokenomics does is that it also creates the incentives for DAOs to attract more people, to create more value, create more impact in the world. And that allows also others to support the DAOs they love, because people can use their Hypha tokens to actually help and support the access to members, to the DAOs they want to support. So I think we are including the collaboration at the core of the system. This logic that value can flow, the collaboration context is being encouraged all across the board so that freely, but with a sense of belonging, people can create ventures, can create groups of people with the same vision and a shared purpose.
How I'm looking at tokens and tokenomics is that money is kind of controlled by states. So they are kind of having control of how much they're going to issue, what is going to be the value. So there we have this technology of the blockchain, which in most simple terms is like kind of digital book that's just tracking things. It has many other things, but in terms of our conversation, it's just what Dominic says. It's like, okay, Dominic sent Gabriel 1 token. And then instead of me having my book and then writing that down, it's like that happened digitally. That's one part. And then other part that is kind of crucial for understanding is that these things is not able to change. So basically that there is this record, and because it's digital and because multiple nodes needs to verify it, that's kind of not changeable. So that's the only thing technical that people need to understand. Each community has access inside our ecosystem and inside our tooling to issue their own token and set up their rules. And then in these terms, that's called tokenomics. You have this virtual thing, and then you're setting up the rules of the game, and that's tokenomics. And then moving step forward, each community can create and align things in different values. It's like, okay, in our community, we value hugging, right? So every time you hug someone, you're going to get token. I think applicable to so many things, because we usually talk about certain, okay, I sell you this, or I do this to you, and then I receive this. But I think what Dominic was mentioning is important to open up for different people engaging with our tool, that you can really explore different options with this thing and really issue token for many different things, which at the end is just aligning value and saying, okay, this is what we value in this community. So we can tie our token to whatever we want.
That's a great way to say it. I've never heard anybody talk about the idea of like it's replacing like a book, but that's true, right? It's like that's how accountants used to have their notes prior to the days of Excel and spreadsheets and all, right? It was all written in ledgers. Right? And that's what this is. It's a distributed ledger or a decentralized ledger. Every computer that's processing the information of the blockchain based on whatever protocol it has the same ledgers, copy of the ledger. They all have it. So if I try to change mine and send it into the blockchain, everybody else rejects it because it's always checking to see if it matches. Does it match? Does it match? Does it match? Nope. Okay. And so this immutable ledger, also called a third ledger, right? So you had single ledger accounting from the beginning of human history, which just meant, I carried my value with me everywhere I went because there's no way for me to get credit or anything like that. Trading was just peer to peer, and that was that. There was no recording, basically. Then you had double ledger accounting. And that was the beginning of commerce, say 5000 BC in Mesopotamia or something like that. Or back in ancient times, someone came up with the idea and said, well, wait a minute. If I track the ledger here and you keep a copy, we can reconcile, right? And make sure we're on the same page. And if we are, then we can do good business. And so you didn't have to bring everything to the market from your farm to do a deal. You could go to the market, you could bring maybe some of your goods, and you could do a deal with a merchant that says, okay, I'll pay you half now for 500 bushels of that corn. And you go, great. You sign a little deal. You have your ledger, 500 bushels. I got $500. Guy owes me 500 more. And now I can come back. And that allowed people to move value all over the world. The banking system we have now and everything, it's all double ledger. When I first got into blockchain in 2010, people started talking about triple ledger, right? Because that's what the blockchain is, a third ledger, the third rail. And why that's so impactful is because, again, it is immutable. It is like the most trustworthy person that could ever exist. A human being who cannot lie at all is taking a book and writing everything down constantly for everybody. And it does this so effortlessly that I think people almost like forget about it in blockchain, but we have not explored this in accounting or in finance in any really meaningful way. And many people will tell you that that's going, put it this way, double ledger accounting is responsible for the world we live in. Human beings would never have been able to engage in the level of industry that we have without it, because we couldn't do large scale projects over years and years and years. As an entrepreneur, you couldn't borrow money really for your business except your family and friends, right? Like people close to you. So it opened up this entire world of finance that we see that allowed humanity to create the world we're in. And so some might argue that we've gone a little excessive, and that is what it is. But a third ledger starts to allow things like, we don't need banks, guys. We really don't anymore. It's a joke. See, the Federal Reserve acts as the third ledger in the United States of America. That's what it does. It reconciles all of the transactions at the end of the banking day in the US. So every bank sends their ledger of the today's transactions, and the Federal Reserve checks them all against each other. It reconciles. And if at the end of the day, Wells Fargo sent more money to Bank of America, Wells Fargo puts money over to Bank of America, which is really just a digital ledger change. We don't need that. All blockchains do that for us now automatically. So banking like that's really a joke. We could keep our value on the blockchain, no problem. It's safe. It can't be stolen. And the other reason banks existed was because, you didn't want to keep your gold bars at home. Banks would secure your money. We don't need that. Private keys, done. But these legacy systems and multi-$100 billion companies are not going to just roll over. But the truth of the matter is they are obsolete. We just haven't gotten there yet.
I want to bring this back to mixing this concept of tokens and money with the network and this synergistic, mutually supportive, collaborative space. If we look at organizations like Costco and Walmart, Walmart takes over a city and small businesses need to close. What Hypha is doing, building this network, is opening the opportunity for small businesses to rise again as independent small enterprises that have an opportunity to tap into this massive network effect, so that instead of small businesses having to close and the business owner who's had his shop for 40 years, it was passed down as a family heirloom, and he loves what he does. Now he has to go and stock shelves at Walmart. He can actually keep his pride, his joy, his creativity, his ownership in a small business. And this is, I think, part of what the network can provide. Costco, as one example, I've been told, will do a good deal with a small supplier and then say, hey, you need to scale up because we have bigger volume. And that sounds good for the small supplier. So then they add to their machinery and their investment, and then they're a medium-sized supplier, and it's kind of above their head. But then what Costco does is put pressure on the pricing. So they reduce the margin, the profitability of this medium supplier, so that Costco has got better margins for itself. But then this comfortable small operation who thought they were going to have some more time and money freedom by doing a good deal with Costco now has to work harder than they used to for smaller margins because Costco is pressuring them into what they do. So I really believe, and I think this approach to having a distributed, decentralized network of small collaborative operators and being able to connect them together and then drive that through all of these wonders of tokenomics is a game changer for so much in society.
I just want to add to that, in a sense, there is a lot of talk in a broader community about this kind of competition and collaboration. And I think on this example, it perfectly explained how in the past, like we built our tools, then tools built us. So it was kind of like that. All of these previous systems lead us to certain outcomes, and then we build on that, and it was feedback loop. So in the same way, this new system enables this network effect where instead of having one giant Google or Walmart, you have a ton of small producers that can then, through the network of digital technology, kind of connect with each other and then exchange value. And then there is no need to kind of have these giants that are kind of able to support certain things, but rather the many small businesses are able to connect and exchange value. I experienced that really well in Mexico because Mexico City is like one of the biggest cities in the world. After being here for a while, I just realized that even in the biggest cities, it consists of the smaller neighborhood. And then it's really like all of these smaller neighborhood consist like small cities. It's technically one big city, but inside there are like a lot of small cities. And also here, then you experience this contrast between having Walmart and then having a lot of small business owners. One benefit is having this human aspect of the business where you know owner, where you speak with them, removing this giant depersonalization of business. But then on the other hand, it has this network effect. Together, we are really stronger and we are not trying to compete.
We're operating at a number of levels all in one. An organization can come and create an extra department for what they're already doing, or they can be a startup and literally start from scratch. We call it that aspect, that perspective is an organization in a box, right? They get what they need to start. And then it's alignment and team building and prioritization of work and consensus building and all of this stuff. Plus, they then also can, on the basis of that level of ownership as a mini organization, they also then tap into these network effects in the Hypha network that is just at the beginning stages of coming together.
What I wanted to add is that each DAO will have its own utility token. So imagine a community, a village, a bioregion, right? That can unify people under the banner of this utility token to share value, to exchange goods and services, whatever utility is valuable for this community or this village or this bioregion. And what that does is that it indeed fosters collaboration, because then suddenly the people in the same area can transact, can use this utility token for their daily needs. And the idea is really to create marketplaces, for example, integrated with the DAO. And we have several partners in that space so that each DAO can actually propose products, services, any kind of value creation vehicle that they want to share, with other people for which they want to create this local economy. And now if you apply that to a business, that's also really, really interesting, because this utility token can be a really simple expression for them to value their unique value proposition and to define what it is that they are actually creating as an organization in terms of value for the people. How is that useful for you people? That's materialized by the utility token.
I think of utility token, and maybe there's different perspectives on this, but I think of it as access rights or service rights or discount rights. If I have a token, then it gives me rights to either access or gain a service or get a discount. Is there more to it from your guys' perspective? To me, it's some kind of access right.
I'd say that it depends really on the project. Generally, yes, I agree with you. But depending on the use case, the utility can be defined in various different ways. The utility can be, for example, to clean up beaches that are polluted with plastic. That's the purpose of this DAO. What they value is that the plastic is removed, right? So the utility of the token is actually to, yes, get access to these kind of projects, but it's driven by the activity to remove the plastic from this environment. That's actually a power of the utility token, because each DAO can redefine it the way they want and the way it's the most meaningful for the purpose they have. I would directly actually connect the utility token with the purpose. I think there's a direct connection between the two. And because the DAOs have their purpose encoded on chain for everybody to see in a transparent way, I think that makes this combination of technology plus utility really powerful.
There is this project Tulum Coin, which is literally doing that. One part of it is basically that hotels and different people are paying like kind of these things in Tulum Coin, and then it's used to regenerate and do like specific actions so that this area can kind of stay clean. So I think it's important that we try to open up and inspire people of the different use cases. But yeah, it's very open mechanism.
Crowdfunding measure of accounting for contribution and then how that gets used to do a project. Good perspective.
There's so much of these things that are happening around us every day that we're not aware of. And I think that brings me to another important point about tokens. It's kind of a secondary benefit. It almost forces you to get educated about value and money. And that's important. That's like a big deal because we need that consciousness.
I wanted to come back to the essence of the Hypha Network. Why are we doing all of that? Why is it even useful? And my response to that is that we are going through massive social and ecological challenges. We can't deny that. The world is shifting. There's a transition happening. And it's really important that organizations, groups of people can collaborate to face those challenges. We are talking about, of course, economic collapse, for example, or climate change, people struggling, poverty and displacement of people due to crises or wars, land degradation, ecosystem collapse. So the list is long. And we know that the competition model, which is the lowest level of collaboration, won't allow us to get to the point where collectively we can find solutions for those problems. So from my point of view, the Hypha Network is an attempt to bring in energy, bring in people and talents and organizations to do something about it.
On the first level, we have this concept of a single DAO, which could be a small or itself could be a large organization, potentially with thousands of people. And they have a singular organizational purpose and they're collaborating, they're taking responsibility to do their part and contribute. And there's a different way of managing that. Then the middle ground is this anchor DAO concept where a group is inspiring and attracting and empowering many, many, many smaller groups that again share some level of organizational purpose. An easy example that comes to mind is like a political movement. So you have a political movement and that gets broken down into state level and city level. And each one of those could be its own small collaborative group, but still have ties to the larger political movement or network. And then we have this concept of the network itself. So we've gone from a single DAO to the anchor DAO, which are ecosystems of themselves. And then we have the network, which is all of that mixed in together in this giant, innovative, creative space that we don't know what that future looks like. Alex, maybe you can speak to that in terms of your vision of the network being entirely decentralized and how that connects with the value, the tokens, anything else that goes into that pot.
I think that the technology and the DAOs and ecosystems of DAOs allow to actually manage complexity, great levels of complexity, while still being manageable. So imagine a DAO, which is like a cell. We have created this design mimicking nature. And let's say it's a cell in the human body, right? It has its purpose, its mission, and it's laser focused on this specific purpose. And then there are other cells in the body, right, that are fulfilling other functions. And all these cells are collaborating with each other to create, motion to make sure that the body can function, right? And that's really the same idea for the network and for the ecosystems. Being complementary in our missions, one DAO at a time, allows us to manage very, very complex systems without having to predefine what exists. It's impossible to do it. It's too complex. The human brain cannot even imagine what that is. But one DAO at a time, creating relationships between DAOs, in the DAO to DAO collaboration, forming therefore an ecosystem is the key from my point of view to get to this complexity while being still very efficient at the DAO level and very informed as well with the community surrounding the DAO nucleus in the center, the core team in the center. So I really think that we have something really special here that allows us indeed, as you said, Gabriel, to go from an individual endeavor to a collective realization and achievement. And that's the beauty of the Hypha Network.
I think it's also in the network theory, the same terminology used, but basically you have nodes and edges. Each of us technically can be called node, and then edge is connection between us. And then in this call, I'm one node, and then there are three edges, right? From me to Dominic, from me to Alex, from me to Gabriel. And then basically in the similar way, then these things kind of building up. In Hypha building blocks, we have first members, right? Then on top of the members, we have circles. So like, let's say 4 of us kind of are forming circles. So that's next level of complexity. Then from the circle level of complexity, we form DAOs. That's organization. And then from DAOs, we have ecosystem. And the reason for all of that, I think we can always look at two ends of the spectrum. One is failures of the current system and frustration of the current system and pain that current system brought to us individually or collectively. And then the other side is just that things are getting more complicated and we need better tools to deal with this type of complexity. It feels that current technology is very old for the problems and challenges that we are facing. And we need to move from this kind of single-minded focus to group focus. But also in certain cases, when I entered this space, it was like competition is bad, but it has certain healthy elements. But I think in the current system that flipped. So I just see that kind of competition works for certain challenges and it can be effective, but we need to move away from that towards different mindset, which I think one of the things that I see really we can bring through these calls is kind of sharing our experience, because adapting from this mindset to this mindset is going to take a lot of time. And I think organizations that are moving into this don't get discouraged. That's a very long process of adapting to different way of working in order to solve these challenges.
Well, I think you're speaking to something really important there, Arseny, and it's that knowledge that's gained over time by operating in a DAO and working with the various elements of Web3, which is really intimidating for people. And as I was saying earlier, it's something that we're constantly striving to kind of like obfuscate and put into the background. One of the things about Hypha that I realized in the last month or so is that what we really offer is knowledge, right? Yes, we've built this software, but we're the world's foremost experts on DAOs. We can safely say that. We have worked in it for the founders for 4.5 years now, give or take. I've been at 6 months, the rest of the team varying times, Arseny longer than me. We have the experience every day. We are the product in a sense. Everything I do in the DAO contributes to our knowledge base. And that's compounding around a team. And really, it's just exponential, right? And so we're trying to capture this knowledge base right now between conversations like this, but you cannot understand the DAO without being in it. That's the difference. It is a different paradigm. We're not talking about just a different thing than what you're used to. Like, oh, it's like this, but a little bit different. No. It is a completely different way of operating. It is totally foreign from your corporate environment or your small business. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's amazing. I don't know. Maybe I'm sure some people don't like DAOs that have been in them, but in general, it is an enlightening experience. You are free from so many different things. Like Arseny was talking about, this sort of like competitive, impress your boss model. There is no boss. I don't have to impress a boss. I need to do my job well. I need to treat my fellow teammates well. And that's who assesses my value to the company, to the project, right? That is so freeing. It's unbelievable. We have eliminated management. It has to be saving us a lot of money, right? Because basically you don't have anybody who's just in a position to manage. We all have action, right? Leadership has its place, but we have to kind of become our own leaders. And then we have to lead each other in different ways all the time, right? We all take turns leading. We all take turns supporting. And it just creates, again, a totally different environment than you've been used to. And we're the best people in the world to teach you about it and show you how to do it.
This interplay between responsibility and complexity, super interesting. You can think of even the remote work culture was a paradigm shift for companies. And the cost structure is very different. We're not only eliminating the service fees of having an office space, the receptionist, all of the stuff that goes into that cost structure. Then we've moved to home, but not only have we moved home, but we've got rid of the mid-level managers. We've got rid of the senior leadership managers. So all of that is our responsibility. I have to be my own office janitor here in my home office in the middle of the jungle. I have to be, the mid-level manager. I have to be the senior stakeholder leader manager. And then I have to play nice with all of you guys and everyone else on the team. And with that sense of responsibility added to all of the complexities of just running a business, let alone understanding how to shift our focus in society today. Decentralization is not just wishful thinking anymore. It's not just a big idea anymore. It's absolutely essential. And it is happening at every level of society. Artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, these things are happening and we have to adapt. And the DAO, the Decentralized Autonomous Organization, is the vehicle to do that. And so the sense of responsibility is tremendous. And so is the level of complexity that we have to deal with every day.
I want to express one point on the Hypha Network, which is really extraordinary from my point of view, because it's all transparent. First, really important element. It allows to share knowledge between different DAOs. Everybody can look at what another organization does and be inspired by what they do, or propose services to help them achieve more. It's all open source. There's no IP anymore. Or if there's IP, it's materialized by utility tokens and it's brought into the context of the DAO and then available to everyone inside this context to use and to benefit from. So we are shaking all the different concepts, what the traditional economic system is really valuing, which is keeping for yourself, protecting, assets, etc., these kind of things, goes away with this collaborative economy. And it's not a loss. It's not something that you give away. It's actually amplifying the potential of your creation, for example. If you have an idea, you have developed IP, by bringing this IP in an open source manner to this environment will amplify it 10 times, 100 times, right? Because now not only your group, your organization will use it, but all these interconnected DAOs and teams will actually serve the purpose that you wanted to fulfill when creating your idea in the first place. And that's really why we are talking about utility, right? We all want to be useful in the world, I believe. We all have a talent. So now it's reality, right? It's a space where people can show up the way they want. Organizations can be meaningful, can really fulfill their purpose without distorting this purpose to comply with an economic system, that imposes its rules, right? So it's really a new space, a new paradigm to play, to create value. And that's a system where everybody wins because everybody is co-invested in the success of the venture, whether it is your customers, your suppliers, your investors, your employees in the classical term, they all become contributors and everybody's really motivated to make the organization successful in that context.
I like how we went from kind of ecosystem to bringing back this conversation to kind of human level, and then understanding what Gabriel said really reminded me that in a sense, every time you overcome certain problem or overcome certain challenges, it's not that gets removed, but that kind of become part of you. So I feel what Gabriel says It's not that we remove these things, but it's kind of that we needed to become these things like middle manager. So in a sense, we are really becoming that on a personal level. And then in the same way, like ecosystem, like DAOs are becoming part of the ecosystem all the way through like fractal structure from the level of individual where you are really learning to kind of how to be your boss. One of the things that I realized after being my boss for a while is that being responsible is not just learning how to push yourself, but also how to be nice to yourself, which I think is much harder. And I think this space, especially when you don't have boss, you really have mirror with yourself. And then to connect that with ecosystem stuff, it really feels like what's happening on the smaller level just gets reflected on the big level. So sometimes when we speak about those things, people can get overwhelming by not understanding these terms, but I think we can always relate it to micro level and level of individual and how this level of complexity gets pushed up.
Arseny mentioned the idea of being your own boss, right? Which is absolutely the experience, the reality of the experience in the DAO. You are your own boss and you are accountable for your work and accountable to, the other people on the team. And sometimes being your own boss is a lot harder than managing other people. It's not just about motivating yourself to do the work or being disciplined or staying organized. It's also not giving yourself a hard time. The modern culture tells us that we should always be doing more, right? We should always be pushing harder. We should always be doing better. We should be performing better. We should be richer, prettier, whatever. And there's an element of the DAO, if you allow it, that will teach you to let go of some of that. That'll teach you that there's different value, right? That maybe today you didn't get all these things done. You didn't check off the checklist, but you were in the Thrive Council call and you inspired one of your teammates. They had a great day after that and they went home and were amazing to their children or their partner. There's a give and take. There's an intimacy in this setting, in my opinion, that's much different, even in remote work, because we are all depending on one another, right? You have to let go a little bit. You have to be vulnerable, right? You are more vulnerable than in a normal setting just by the exposure. I remember some of the first times being in Discord, not wanting to write anything because I knew it was all public, right? And not wanting to talk on the calls because I knew they were all recorded. It's weird. Radical transparency is weird. Even when you're not doing anything wrong, you're just not used to it at first, right? It feels really strange and you feel exposed and you feel, vulnerable. There's no other way to say it. But in time, you really come to value the idea that there's a lot of things you don't have to worry about as so much anymore. Things are out in the open. Information is available to you. Departments of the company are not opaque. I can speak to the development team directly. I don't need some intercompany process, or I just go over there and say, Arseny, what's going on with the product? What's going on with our app? It's an interpersonal relationship. I say it all the time. You have the freedom of being your own boss. I'll phrase it differently this time, but you still have the support of a team. And it's a special thing. I'll keep saying it a million times, but it's a very special thing.
I love how Dominic explains so well how technology can be in the service of life. I really like this decentralized human organization because I really feel we are embodying it on every step of the way. And it's really required to connect these two ideas together and to show like, okay, this is how these two ideas go together and can go together.
I think you're right 100% about the decentralized human organization. Really, we're not a DAO because we're not autonomous, right? We're not a decentralized autonomous organization. I think those were created, the concept early on, for the idea that a group of people could get together, a smart contract could be created that's going to do this thing, and we can all put value into it and it would be autonomous, right? And we could trust it and then we would receive rewards or not. But it wasn't about collaboration and building things, right? So that's a totally different thing to me. Decentralized human organization much better describes what we're doing every day and what this version of a DAO is. It's also our sort of implied operating agreement, right? You do feel really close to people, right? Like, we work all day together. We relate differently. And that there's something in that. There's a little special sauce in there. I can't put my finger on it, but it does exist.